This
Okay,
conference will now be
welcome
recorded.
everyone. Welcome everyone to another edition of Squash Canada's Coach Professional Development webinar series. Today's topic is Don't Be a Kid's Last Coach, and it's being presented today by Glenn Mulcahy from Paradigm Sports. Glenn brings 20 plus years of coaching experience for men, women, boys, and girls in multiple sports. He brings a 360-degree view of what it takes to support players to enjoy the game from recreational to high performance levels. Glenn's a graduate of the University of British Columbia and has mentored and coached thousands of coaches as well as athletes. And we'll talk to you today again about don't being a kid's last coach, which I think is a very important topic for people, especially in today's society. So I'm going to turn it over to Glenn, and he's going to walk you through this amazing presentation today. Take it away, Glenn.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for the humbling introduction, and thanks for inviting me to do this. I'm looking forward to the interaction. The presentation itself is one that I've done in various ways over the last probably 5 or 6 years, whether it be a keynote, workshop, plenary, breakout, and now our online training. So I am receptive to questions during, but if you can table them at the tail end, it will allow us to get through the slides as efficiently as possible. There are a few videos that I did a test with Jeff as we were all kind of logging on. I believe we've got the audio and the video to work competently. Like webinars do have challenges when we're doing that, but they are done, and I'm sharing them to reinforce some of the key points I'm doing in the presentation. So without further ado, I'll jump into it. Okay, the first slide that I share on, and just kind of give you a little, I won't do a lengthy background, but a lot of these pictures for me resonate. I just grab them from the internet in terms of my upbringing of all the various sports that I played in terms of free play, particularly. You know, growing up in Montreal, first thing I started playing was hockey, like everybody when I was growing up at 4 years old. A lot of it was outdoor rinks, a lot of it was pond hockey. I played a lot of soccer in school, primarily unorganized. I did play a couple of years of organized soccer. Far right picture top is, I stole that from Sandlot. If you haven't seen it, if you got kids, it's a great movie for kids and sports. Kid pretending he's Babe Ruth, even though Babe was, 40, 50 years ago. Bottom left, basketball, played a lot of pickup basketball, a lot of biking, and the infamous snowball fights, which unfortunately are, depending on where you live across Canada, they may or may not be condoned at school level, but it's something I truly love doing in addition to all the organized sports. So probably a 50-50 split. And I also sampled a whole bunch of other things, including I did try squash as a kid. I also played a lot of racquetball as a kid, and even when I get into my adulthood, so can relate to the world that you're all in right now. So that was then, and then this is now in terms of how the world has kind of evolved. You look at the evolution, and I'm still trying to figure out how to best do this as a timeline, but the evolution of the internet and the digital era, which is this generation of kids, the Gen Zs, starting in the latter part of the 90s, they don't know the analog word, but fortunately, vinyl and cassettes are kind of making a comeback in a sense. But it really started with the introduction of the Sony PlayStation in 1994. And a lot of people don't realize how old that is, but they and Xbox have kind of revolutionized the video game industry. Netflix was introduced in 1997, but took about 10 years before it really became mainstream, mainly because broadband internet couldn't support it. And the only reason that they're still alive is they were really well funded because the angel investors in Netflix really believed in the platform. And look at it now, it's in COVID particularly, there's been a lot of binge watching. My daughter, for about a month when she was going through a tough time, she was watching Modern Family like every day. It was driving me crazy. A big change is when Google kind of took over the search engine platforms. There were a lot of other ones that were trying to make a vie for that. 1998, and look at them now in terms of being one of the largest corporations in the world and all the acquisitions they've done. 2001 was a transformation of how we listen to music, with iTunes being introduced and the first iPod. And now everybody has kind of evolved to that whole digital platform in terms of music. It also was the year that Xbox was introduced. It's a Consumer Electronics Show, which I happened to be at when they were introducing, and there was a lot of, whether this really would be a go-to platform for Microsoft. And now look at it, 20 years later, they're vying out for market share with PlayStation. 2003 was introduction of Blu-ray as well as HD DVD, but like the Sony Beta versus VHS, Blu-ray won out a couple of years later. And Facebook, 2004, thanks to Mr. Zuckerberg and Harvard, and whether or not he takes full credit for it remains to be seen, but it's been a go-to platform for many millennials. The Gen Zs have kind of adopted Instagram more so. That was later. YouTube was 2005, which has now been acquired by Google, and painfully has also omitted Google Play, which I was a big fan of, which I'm frustrated because I've lost out on some of my functionality. Twitter, as well as the attempt by Nintendo to revolution video gaming to make it more active, and whether or not that did have a long-term play, didn't. Switch has been now introduced and it's kind of taken over that platform. But you look at how new the technology is in terms of the phones that we live off today. The first iPhone was introduced in 2007. And when they introduced it, they said it was the world's first smartphone, which if this was a full interactive presentation, I would prompt the question, which one was? And it wasn't the iPhone, it was actually the BlackBerry. They were the first ones to have email, and where they fell short is they didn't add all the other applications, which allowed iPhone to really dominate the market for a long time. Now you're seeing the LGs and the Huawei's and Samsung's in particular really vying up for a big chunk of that market share. Instagram introduced in 2008, and it is the go-to platform for Gen Z. We talked to a lot of kids who were born, after 1998-ish time frame. Many of them don't even have a Facebook account, but they all do have an Instagram. WhatsApp is really gained a lot of momentum in recent years, introduced in 2010. First tablet ever is iPad, introduced in 2010. So it's only 10 years and change, I guess, since we had the tablet introduced to the market. They were the go-to for a number of years, and now there's a lot of OEM ones that have now taken over a lion's share of market share, and Snapchat in 2011. And I could keep going, but this is kind of the world that we've evolved and how the kids have evolved in all the various digital platforms that they've got accustomed to, as have we. We look and give you an idea of how quickly this all kind of evolved. If you look at the number of years it took for each product to reach 50 million, going back to the automobile, 62 years, and I'm gonna skip to internet was only 7 years before 50 million users. PayPal, thanks largely in part to eBay, was 5 years. YouTube 4, Facebook 3, and Twitter 2 years. Canada has adapted Twitter more than the US has, but it's amazing how fast and the exponential growth of all these digital platforms have hit the market. And then this is the future. And those of you who may or may not be familiar with, but esports has really started to gain a lot of ground in recent years. In Vancouver, we had an esport event, Dota 2, first time in Canada, Rogers Arena, and it was sold out literally, like I heard, 15 minutes. That event had over $24 million in prize money. Top gainers are averaging over $1 million a year. The esports has now exceeded over $1 billion in revenue, and projections are it's going to exceed the NHL revenues within 2 years, which is about $5 billion. And the thing that gets me, and I don't know about the rest of you that are watching this, is that the IOC is considering esports as an Olympic event where they could qualify for a medal in the 2024 Paris Games. And when I shared this with a hockey coach in a clinic last year, he said, if that happens, I'm hanging up my skates and I'm done, because they don't really see video gaming as a sport. Then there's a lot of people that are arguing, the motor control and everything else. But to be an esport, you're having to go at it like 10, 12 hours a day to get to that level, and they have a very short career. So you're wondering why I spend the first 10 minutes of a deck on sports talking about technology and why does it matter? This is why it matters.
I probably would make a time machine. I would make medicine for the sick. I'd probably invent something new. 我会赢到5个总冠军戒指。If I could have an extra 5 years to live. You said 5, right? 5 years. It's a long time. I would try to fix everything I did bad. I would bring my uncle back because I miss him very much. I would get more hamsters. I would probably want to go looking for dark matter. I think I'd go looking for aliens. If I could live an extra 5 years, I was thinking about making like a helicopter, like a wooden helicopter. But I don't have any wood. I want to go check out the moon sometime. I'd probably teach my sister not to hate tuna. I would try and invent a machine that lets you run at light speed. If I had 5 more extra years to live, I would be the boss of all the chipmunks. Eu cantaria na frente de 1 milhão de pessoas. I don't really know. I think I'd do anything. Why are you asking me that?
That video was produced by Nike, and it was they founded a platform called Design to Move, and it was based on health authorities' projections in Canada, the U.S., that as a result of increasing sedentary lifestyles that kids have today, too much reliance on the internet and what have you, that they potentially may die 5 years sooner than their parents. And when I first saw this video and I came across the data set, it was a few years ago, I pretty much fell out of my chair, because without health advances we've had, there's no way that this generation, which happens to be my son and daughter, Generation Z, will die 5 years sooner than I will. I just said to myself, that's unacceptable, and I want to do something about it. And we really have to figure out a way to get kids back to being active, many of which are not to the extent that they should be. And I'm sure that you all see the participation data. There's the US equivalent in the US that a very small percentage of kids are getting their 60 minutes of activity a day. And we've got a lot of work ahead of us to make sure that that happens. Not only are they active in their youth, but also continue to be active in their adulthood. So why do kids play sports? And it's a question I could ask and put it out there to the masses, but I'm going to basically give you the quick answer. They play sports because they're fun, and they quit when they're not. It's not rocket science. This is a quote I shared a couple of years ago. It actually went viral on our social media. It was soon after I'd contributed to a news article I'm going to shed some light on later in the presentation in terms of specialization. And the big unknown, though, is what is fun. So I'm going to do the word cloud exercise as Jeff was mentioning. I'm going to shift to menti.com. I'm going to flip to my browser. So if you go to menti.com, and in there, it's going to prompt for a code, and that's the code, and it'll be at the top of when I go to the browser, 705512. You can enter up to 3 responses. So I'm curious from all of you, what are and why are sports fun? So what are the reasons why sports are fun? And then I'm going to give you the research. I'm going to share a video with you. Let's go here. So this is what this slide is going to look like when I get to browser, and you'll see this come up in real time. So enter the Menti and start into the code, and you're going to start seeing the larger the word, the more responses. So some of you may enter the same responses. We'll give you a couple of minutes to do this. Friends still numero uno. Friends and friendship are kind of aligned. The competition, developing skills. It's interesting that you've got winning, and I'm going to give you some insight on that. So far, we've had about half of you have entered responses. Camaraderie. Challenges exceeding friends. One more minute. I will take a screenshot of this and I'll share it in the PDF version of the that I'm going to send to Jeff. Few answers that have come from kids and surveys that haven't been entered yet, so I'll share those with you. Highlight of my day, that's a good one. Always is for coaches. Nothing better than meeting with kids. Okay, 30 more seconds. So we've got 2 more that haven't entered yet. And pretty bang on with the responses seeing that friends is still #1, and that is going to be one of the responses from the research and based on the interaction I've had with a lot of players and over the years. So I'm going to take this screenshot and it'll be part of the deck that you'll all receive on in terms of the PDF. So we'll come back to the actual research and I'll share some analogies in terms of the kids that I had an opportunity to coach over the years. And I'll copy paste it into that exact slide. So based on my experience, and a lot of these I can relate to all too well. I mean, obviously, the #1 reason why kids play sports is to have fun, but there hasn't been a lot of research to define what is fun. And I tried to do this in a lot of the talks I've done. The other reasons that they want to do something they're good at, so develop their skills, and that'll come up on another research. Staying in shape and getting exercise. Now this is based on a Notre Dame study. It's about 5 years old now, but it's the largest that I'm aware of to date. Over 18,000 kids were surveyed. So top 5 reasons, and it started with having fun. About the same time, Amanda Visick, if you're not familiar with her work, her study was not large by any means, and it was primarily done with soccer players, but it was kind of precedent setting because she actually created what is called fun maps. And she interviewed kids and asked them why they played. 95% said because it's fun. And then she actually took it to the next level and she asked them, okay, why is it fun? Came up with 81 different characteristics in our fun maps. And these are the top 6. And this is literally what we should be focusing in on in terms of coaching. So have an opportunity to try your best. So that's basically work on their skills. Another big one is when a coach treats them with respect, and that's one of the reasons what pushes them a lot of them out of sports. Getting playing time is a big one, and in this era pre-COVID, and I wouldn't say necessarily during COVID, but I know pre-COVID, to interacting with a lot of different sports groups and talking to a lot of parents and even players, that's a big pet peeve for a lot of players when they're on teams and they're not having an opportunity to play. Kids just want to play a game. And if we deprive them for that opportunity to win a game and do it over and over and over again, yeah, sure, there's going to be a few times in the season where it's an important game to, win a playoff banner or win a tournament or what have you. But going into those games is going to make sure that everybody's on the same page. I've always been a big believer of rolling all of my players, giving them all an opportunity to play in team sports. And it's really important that you give them that opportunity to grow. They play well as a team, and that doesn't necessarily mean winning. It's just when the chemistry is there, they get along with their teammates, and you extend that in terms of, there's no bullying, no cyberbullying, none of the harassment we've seen in some of the sports, and also exercise and getting active. So for me, this is kind of a benchmark, and I can relate to all of them interacting with, hundreds upon hundreds of kids over the years. That should be our focus. But what has evolved is less fun is the adult driven. So the adultification of youth sports. Winning, I noticed, did come up on the word slide exercise, but when she prompted, it was actually ranked 48th of 81 characteristics. So it was bottom half. And if you ask a lot of kids why they play, the winning rarely comes up. And if it does, it's usually kind of going along with, being with their friends, having fun, whatever the case may be. But look at the other ones in the bottom third, playing in tournaments, which is just blown up in the last 10 years, where the Canadian sports industry started out when I started going down this path as a hockey facilitator in 2010. It was a $1.8 billion industry. In 2020, just before COVID hit us, it had evolved to $9 billion in revenue. In the US, they literally saw the same similar exponential growth, where it's projected now over $30 billion in revenue. Practicing with specialty trainers and coaches, that's all about the early specialization. Bottom third. Earning medals and trophies, which is the extrinsic rewards they receive when they're playing in games in lieu of the intrinsic growth. Traveling new places to play, another kind of tying in with that travel ball tournament concept, but one that gets me all the time. You look at the least fun activity is getting pictures taken, and having played a lot of team sports growing up, I can relate to that, especially when I was playing hockey. We were playing a lot of outdoor rinks. We got our pictures before, practice, whatever the case may be. And sometimes they wouldn't even let us go on the ice because they were shuffling all these players through it. So I've got to kind of revisit and how we do that a little differently. And I don't believe the kids. This is a great PSA that was done in New Zealand. And this is the kids version, and later on in the presentation, I'm going to play the adult version. So they asked them why they play sports and what they want to get out of it.
I'm not saying to let kids be kids. I get to be with my friends and just have fun. When my team scores a goal,
playing as a team and pick each other up and learn from our mistakes.
Just having a good time, running around.
hanging out with my friends.
Of course I like playing it, but I really like hanging out with my mates and playing alongside.
It's really just having fun and game.
Probably hanging out with my mates.
Having fun with my teammates.
Hanging out with my friends.
Heaps of parents swear at me. People say, why are you on this team? You're not good enough.
A lot of parents have been calling out, like, kick her, punch her, beat her. The coach in our team is swearing about how bad we were.
The supporters would keep yelling at us. I'm useless. We were crap. A freak.
You suck, you suck, you suck. I feel really bad because I know it's going to happen to me. They always do get to me. Make me feel pretty bad about myself.
You kind of failed in it. This makes me feel sad because I'm just trying to play the game.
Pass, like in a gentle voice, to run hard and to tackle them hard and show no fear. Oh, Charlie.
My parents always tell me to do my best no matter what.
I got kicked in the shin by someone by accident. My dad yelled out, it's okay, and that just made me feel better. And then I got back onto the field and tried my best.
Shush. Oh, go to church. Shush. If you want to say something, make it positive. I don't want to hear what you want to say about me because you're not going to me.
I would just say, please don't yell out mean things.
It's not very nice to say things like that.
We all make mistakes.
It's just the game. It's not like it's the Rugby World Cup.
Shush, or go to church, and it's not the Rugby World Cup. It kind of resonated with me. And this campaign, it was ironic. I was at a conference totally unrelated to sport. It was all about building our online platforms. And one of the people that I was connecting with was from New Zealand. And I shared with her what I was doing and building our platforms. And she said, you would not believe how bad it is in New Zealand, that the All Blacks are not getting involved to help, bring it down so that the parents understand that it's all about the kids. The reality and sadness is that 70% of kids are quitting sports by the age of 13 pre-COVID. I'm doing everything possible to ensure that these are not the next 7. And the Project Play released some data set late last year. And I'll share one of the videos called Don't Retire Kid, but it was all relevant to the fact that 62% of kids were quitting by the age of 11 in the US, with an average playing career, for lack of a better word, of 3 years. So they've identified a major problem, nutrition. I know in Canada that's not as high, but it is getting there, and we do follow US trends, so we've got to make sure we nip this in the bud. Ironically, in Norway, and if you're familiar with their success they've had in the Olympics, they're now the most winningest country in the Winter Olympics of all time. And in the last Winter Olympics, they won 39 medals. They don't even allow their kids to compete, meaning keeping track of scores, wins, losses, what have you, till they're 13 years old. And as a result, they plant the seed, promote friendship, having fun, enjoying the game, the competition, all the stuff that you identified in the word slide. So by the time they get into their teenage years, they truly love the sport, and they truly love being active, and they continue well into their adulthood. And they've been very successful in winter competition, particularly in the Olympics. So why are they quitting? And this I also can relate to all too well, because unfortunately, my son at 15 years old decided to quit hockey. And the number one thing he said to me is he wasn't having fun anymore. He played AAA hockey for a number of years, and the last couple of years I was not coaching him. And I was talking to him as well as a number of other players, and the coaches they did have were focusing so much on winning that they forgot what it really was all about. Even at the competitive level, I can tell you firsthand, because I've coached there, is that kids, they play for all the reasons we're talking about. And if we take it too serious, they will drop out. And where the big numbers start dropping out in Canada, that I've seen, is 14, 15 years old, particularly girls. If girls are not enjoying this experience, they will pull out twice of the rate of boys. Number one reason they're quitting is criticism they're taking from the adults and their teammates. This video I'm going to play is Ray Winstone plays the role of a parent, but if you watch it, it's also, I've seen this on a number of occasions of coaches acting in the same way, and you imagine why kids and also officials are quitting.
Listen to this monkey. Every week he does this, screaming and shouting.
That's a yellow card, red card. Yellow card, red card. How are these kids supposed to learn the game if you don't know the game? He's an animal.
Look at him, he gives up his Saturday mornings to do this. Now, was it the right decision? It might have been, it might not have been. Who knows? We all make mistakes.
You mug.
Would you take this to work? No.
Okay, thank you. No, don't thank me. Thank you. Just clear the plan out, please. You ain't got a clue. Right. Clown.
You see, Dad's trying to live out his own dreams for his son.
What's the matter with you? That's a suicide.
Now, how's he supposed to learn if he can't make his own mistakes?
You're not watching the game, mate. You're watching me. You ain't gonna see nothing yet.
It's no wonder we're losing so many refs when they're having to fight with people like Jack the Biscuit here every week.
Come on, stay back. You're running about like a chicken, you know it.
And it's no wonder thousands of kids give up the game either. If we carry on like this, we won't have a game left. Ref? Some of us need to take a long, hard look at ourselves.
To see that the issue that we're having in Canada, the US, is not just a North American problem, it is a global problem. It's happening in the UK, it's happening in Australia, New Zealand. It's a global issue where we've got to kind of ramp it back and bring the game back to the kids. Number two reason that kids are quitting is that coaches are running short benches. And talking to a lot of players, especially when they got 13, 14, 15 years old over the years, the analogy they would share with me when I asked them, why do you play? It's fun. And they tell me all the different reasons why it's fun. And they said, what's not fun? And number one reason is when coaches were playing their favorites. Even when they're 12, 13, 14 years old, they're very aware when coaches do that. We have to be cautious and make sure that we allow them to have an opportunity to fail, and that they are also in an opportunity where it's safe for them to do so, well, the extended criticism that you saw in the first video. See a a comment into the chat, so I'm just going to read it quick. Do you understand this delineate individual versus team sports? Tennis Canada has a stat that says that kids are 65% routine after the first tournament, 90% routine after the third tournament. You can see this being opposite in team sports for the individual. To answer your question in terms of single player sports versus team, the data sets that I've been referencing are en masse. They're not specific to individual sports. The study done by Amanda Visick that was done on was soccer players. I don't think there has been a lot of done on the single sport specifically because they usually zero in on the big numbers. So the sports with the highest number of registrations. And if I can find, I will definitely share that with Jeff as well. So I'm kind of giving more on the generic front, but it is, and I do see that would probably be golf, and I'll reference that later in the presentation. Has got a great program that is increasing, and they're growing their numbers versus some of the other sports in Canada are seeing decreasing numbers primarily in the team sports. So hopefully that addresses that. Another third reason is not safe to fail, and I referenced esports earlier in the presentation to the exponential growth that they've seen. If you think of video games per se, just in general, and most Gen Z kids have grown up with the PlayStations and the Xboxes and the Wii and what have you. If you think about playing a video game, if you play and you fail, meaning you lose your 3 lives in a video game, what do kids do? They don't panic. All they do is they just press the reset button and they keep playing. It's really no different than when, you know, we were all growing up and played pond hockey or any other sports, and the puck went into the net, you just went and grabbed it and you just kept playing, and you play for hours on end. Sadly, in organized sports today, there's so much structure and there's so much emphasis on the almighty dollar for one, chasing the dream, NCAA. That's where a lot of parents are, and I'll share some insight on that. But also the winning has been the driving focus pre-COVID. My hope is when we come out of this, which we still got a ways to go, that we're not going to see a new normal, that we're actually going to see a better normal. And then we use this reflection period to kind of revisit and how we're doing it, how we're approaching it in all sports, whether it be individual and team, so that kids are loving and enjoying the experience. They play for a very, very long time, because the sport that you're all coaching is one that you can play for a long time. A lot of team sports you can play, with the exception of probably tackle football, you can play for a long time. But if they lose that love and that passion for the sport early on, chances are, and the studies are showing, that they're not going to continue playing at all, any sports. And that's where it is a big issue. This is just kind of a deep dive in terms of specialization, multi-sport. I might skip some of the slides for purposes of time, but I contributed to an article that J.J. Adams, who's the editor, sports editor for the Vancouver Sun. He also contributes to the Times Colonist and the Vancouver Province. And this was 2 years ago, where they asked me to contribute some data sets to that article. And JJ, at the end of April, after he shared it, and it dropped on Easter Sunday, 2018, which is kind of ironic, in print, and then the digital version we shared out on our Facebook page, it literally went viral across the globe, because he really zeroed in on the challenges that early sports specialization is having on all sports. And I'm just going to give you some insight on that front. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, but he's kind of the nemesis and what led to what I call the 10,000 hour rule fallacy. David Epstein's done a great job of debunking this work, but in this book, he highlighted the work that Eric Anderson did, that it took 10,000 hours for violinists to become elite status. And it kind of exploded, and a lot of people piggybacked on that. And they said, okay, now we got to zero in on, if you're going to become an elite athlete, you got to put 10,000 hours, which was one of the big drivers for the specialization. Ironically, Princeton in 2014, when they did an analysis of what practice did versus a lot of other variables, i.e. DNA, nutrition, psychology, it only accounted for 18% of what led to elite status in sports. And there's many other people saying that, you know, it really depends on your upbringing. It depends on a lot of variables. So just practicing and specializing is not necessarily going to reach, and more often than not, it's going to lead to burnout. Great analogy I had from a coach that I was co-coaching in softball for a number of years. He would say, practice makes permanent, meaning if you practice wrong and you're just going to basically learn a really, really bad habit for a long period of time. So it's amazing how many coaches don't slow drills down, make sure that they teach the skills correctly, do the error correction. And we have that a lot. And I do a lot of evaluations in the hockey world. That's number one things that's zeroing out with coaches. You know, it's great to run a drill, but you have to understand why you're running it to begin with and share that with your players. And number two, make sure that you zero in on the error and you correct that error so that they don't continue to make it over time. So that's one of the big pressing problems when we're doing the practice and the delivery. Give you a couple examples of multi-sport athletes, one being Jordan Spieth. He was a multi-sport athlete right up until college, and the Titleist Performance Institute shared with a few colleagues of mine that at 12 years old, he actually went to his parents and said he just wanted to focus in on golf. Both his parents were multi-sport athletes, played collegiately. They said, no, we want you to benefit from playing multiple sports, multiple coaches, multiple teammates, build different motor skills, what have you. And they said that you can make that decision after you graduate from high school. So he continued playing multiple sports. And give you an idea how good an athlete he was or is. He played football, he was a quarterback. Played baseball, he was a pitcher. Played basketball, he was a point guard, and he was also golfing. So the most skilled positions in all those sports. And he chose golf at 18, and then within a few years he was, the rave on tour, although he's kind of petered out a little bit, but he's already won 14 times, and 3 of those have been majors, and he's still got a long ways to go. Another example is local boy Jamie Benn, Dallas Stars, who went to the Stanley Cup this year, the Bubble Stanley Cup. But he was also a multi-sport athlete. His most preferred sport was baseball, and he played that along with hockey right up until he was 19. But he had the slow development path going to the NHL, and he didn't really start playing at a high level. So played rep hockey on Vancouver and Victoria. Then he went to junior B, then he went to junior A, then he finally made it to major junior when he was 19. And that was the year we finally got onto Hockey Canada's radar screen, went to the World Juniors, and he actually won a gold medal. And if you look at all the accomplishments he had since that point, he's been on Olympic gold teams, won the Art Ross Trophy, he's been in the Stanley Cup, albeit we weren't able to raise it in the 7th game. But he's had a great career, and the irony is he wasn't drafted until the 5th round. There's not many 5th round draft picks in the NHL, but he's an amazing athlete. Aspen Institute, if you're familiar with it, they have a spinoff called Project Play. They just hosted a summit this past week virtually, but they partner with USA Tennis as well as a lot of the NGBs in the US, including professional sports, going back about 4 years ago, and came up with this promotional campaign. Why kids are pulling out of sports, burnout, overuse, injuries, and they're not developing fundamental motor skills, physical literacy. But the key things that have jumped out over the last 10 years has been over a 400% increase in ACL surgeries between the ages of 10 and 17. I interviewed Dr. Tommy John for one of our summits, and he shared with me that just wait, because the pediatric ACL surgeries are now coming, meaning under 10 years old. A large group that's really being affected of girls because they're all chasing the dream NCAA scholarships. In baseball, now over 60% of the Tommy John surgeries, which is a full reconstruction of the ulnar ligament, they're being done on teenage arms between the ages of 15 and 18. And some of those surgeries are being done because parents are under the illusion that if they have that their son has that surgery, they'll be stronger and they'll be faster. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. And if you have that surgery, there's a chance you'll probably have it again. And also an issue in concussions, and I know it's been a hot topic for a number of years. I'm not going to beat up that, but there's been over 200% increase in concussion rates between the ages of 9 and 12 years old. Hockey was one of those sports, but they did a lot of great work to reverse that trend, but we're still seeing it in football, rugby, soccer. Figure skating is another one that a lot of people don't wear of because they're not wearing helmets. So it's a big issue when they're doing the same thing over and over again. NCAA reality check, and we'll do the deep dive on this, but it's interesting. Mark Emmett, the president, 2016, he shared an interview that he did that they interviewed their basketball players at NCAA, and 75% of Division I, 50% of Division II, and 25% of Division III thought they were going to go on to play the NBA, when less than 1% do. So it was kind of interesting that even the players themselves think that they have a shot at going to the NBA and the big contracts. And it's also a driver where parents, over 40% of them, are forcing their kids to specialize early. Not sure if you're familiar with how bad it had gotten in the NCAA until they changed their rules in 2019. This is probably the worst case scenario that I came across. A 9-year-old kid in Nevada was offered, I think he was playing in LA in the special elite program in football, was offered a full ride scholarship to the University of Nevada at 9. There's a lot of things going to happen to a 9-year-old body, but to him, he's 18 to get to college. So a lot of people are like, are you kidding me? The analogy before that I was sharing was there was a 12-year-old girl that was offered a full ride scholarship to North Carolina by Anson Dorrance. And then the NCAA said, we got to nip this in the bud. This is crazy. You know, we're recruiting earlier and earlier. And the joke was they're going to start recruiting as they're coming out of the womb. Though the rules were changed that you now can't have those conversations with players until the sophomore, junior age groups. And USA Lacrosse was the big driver for that. This is the article that I was referencing earlier before everybody jumped on, and I'm going to provide a link to this so that Jeff can share it out to all of you. It came out this weekend. It was posted in the Atlantic, and they were talking about the craziness of how parents were looking at not just sports like the money sports that I'm very familiar with, you know, the football, the hockey, the baseballs, the basketball, but the niche sports. Squash was really highlighted, as was fencing, and how crazy the parents were. They were building squash courts in their houses or fencing areas, and they're all chasing NCAA scholarships. And the irony is, although squash in the US has grown in terms of their numbers, they're not growing in terms of numbers at the collegiate. And in fact, because of COVID, several of the colleges have had to nip their varsity programs. I think Stanford was the big one, where 13 of their varsity programs were nixed because of COVID. And a lot of other Division II and Division III schools are looking at the same thing. Can we sustain this? Can we keep going? Because we're going online training and what have you. So that article I will share with Jeff to share with all of you, and it's definitely worth the read. It's a little lengthy, but I got a lot out of it. Alberta Lacrosse did talk for them a few years ago, and afterwards they shared with me that they had done a retention report, a survey of their membership, because they were really concerned about the numbers they were losing. They lost over 11,000 players, and it's across the province over a 3-year time period. So after that, they did a survey, reached out to the membership. I think they had about 2,500 responses, which was pretty decent. And the top 3 reasons why kids were quitting lacrosse, number 1 is to focus on other sports. And of that, the large percentage was hockey. Second was baseball. They were also quitting because of lack of fair play policies, meaning they weren't getting playing time. And they were quitting because of lack of sportsmanship. Oakland Children's did a hospital study in 2017. They looked at NBA players. And you might not be able to read the slide in detail, but those that continue to play multiple sports until they graduate from high school before they enter university suffered much like 10 times less injuries than their specialization counterparts who started specializing in basketball at grade 8. And multi-sport NBA athletes who played, you know, until, and some of them even going to college and playing multiple sports, had longer playing careers. So it was an interesting data set. And you're looking at, you know, longevity, and you want to play professionally. If you're specializing early, chances are you're going to end your career sooner because you've burnt out. This is really interesting, and I came across, and I keep referencing, TD Ameritrade did a great study. They surveyed their clients in 2015 because they were concerned that they weren't investing enough for their retirement income, because based on their research is that we're gonna live longer, our generation. And then the red flag was, you know, the younger generation potentially may not. But it was interesting, 43% of the parents in that study said that sports were too expensive, which is where a lot of their disposable income was going. The average spend, and this is US dollars, $500 a month per child. Average household had 2, so they're spending $12,000 US. That's the average in the US. But here's where it got really goofy. 67% of those that responded were aspiring for their kids to get an athletic scholarship. 47% thought their kids were going to play professionally. 34% thought they were going to go on to the Olympics. I was like blown away because the percentages of the kids that were actually going to get there are so low compared to the reality of what the parents are expecting. And that's what's also driving parents to appeal releases in our hockey space. I've had a number of executive members come to me and say, you know what, we're getting parents come to us and the parents are appealing when their kid goes from a AAA and they're dropped down to a AA team for their development because they're concerned that their kids are not going to get scouted. Scouts don't look at kids until much later, probably 14, 15. And what the big driver for that is the major junior drafts that we have cross country. This is the paper version of the article I contributed to, and it was front page. And then it just kind of took us from like, plodding along, and then boom, we exploded as an organization because of all the social media following. But that JJ changed the name of it. I didn't even know it was dropping in the paper edition. A lot of people started phoning and emailing me that day. Hey, you're in the paper. I'm like, oh, it was pretty wild. But it did have the desired impact because a lot of people started revisiting their programming as a result of that. And one of the last things I share with parents, and if you have parents that are aspiring, and I was talking to Jeff just beginning, that it is kind of a driver. A lot of them are aspiring for the kids to get a scholarship, go down the States playing squash, particularly the Ivy League, which is why I think that article is relevant for you. Way I end parent presentations, I'll ask the question, do you know? What is your true calling? And I'll go, expect many of you, 20s, 30s, 40s, maybe even later, still haven't figured out what it really is that you want to do in life. But if that's the case, then how can we expect a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old to focus on one sport and start playing that as early as that time frame and never explore and have an opportunity to try other sports? Is it fair to them? And the eyes kind of go, okay. And the other analogy I get, how many kids love chocolate cake? Probably all of them, right? So would you allow them to eat the chocolate cake, the entire cake in one sitting? No. As a parent, you would say, you're going to have a portion now, you'll have a portion. So do it in bits and pieces and also try a whole bunch of different, not just sports, but I'm a big believer that kids should be well-rounded. They should also have to focus on academics if they're aspiring for a scholarship. They should try other activities like drama and art and music and what have you, not just zero in on a sport early on because they will burn them out and they won't develop the way they should. Another driver is the infamous ride home, and I could talk about this at length, and I'll give you an analogy at the back end of what my ride was. This video was done by True Sport, which is a Canadian organization, the spinoff of Cedar. And it's also went viral when they released it, and now it's about 3 years old. But imagine if you're a 9-year-old kid and this was your ride.
So, not your best practice. Can we agree on that? Seemed like you wanted to hang out with your friends more than practice. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. Just tell me. Because you can do that anytime. Maybe we can skip your next game. Because choosing to waste your time, that's one thing. But wasting my time and your coach's time, that's selfish. You don't care about other people. You don't care about hard work. You don't care about teamwork. That's why you're always on the bench, every time it matters. Your coaches think you're shoulders. Hockey coach, soccer coach, football coach, everyone else. So, if you want to keep playing, you need to take a good hard look at yourself and think about that.
I don't know if they watched the video of Ray Winstone on kind of the ending, but there's no way that kids should have that. I was fortunate, I guess, my dad passed away when I was really young, and my mother didn't drive, so I was driven to and from games and practices with coaches, and we would just chat. There was never any, negativity in those rides. But I know a lot of kids, and I even see it in parking lots where parents are chastising their kids for making mistakes, et cetera, et cetera. It's no wonder the kids are quitting as early as they do. The other big driver and the reason why they're quitting is the time, travel, financial commitment. Regardless of the sport, some of the team sports that I know of, it could be $8,000 to $10,000 a year for your kids to play. I know the individual sports, yours being one, tennis being another, they can also be, in the thousands upon $1,000 for support their kids, especially if there's a lot of travel involved for tournaments. So, and also the time commitment. A lot of kids, they just want to be kids. And if they're going 5-6 days a week in their sports and they do it for 10 or 11 months a year, it's a big strain on them and it's a big strain on their family. And one of the references in the article that we'll be sharing, there was a mother that said, you know what, enough is enough. We got to slow this down. We've got to be careful in terms of the commitment we expect of players themselves when we're coaching. So 5 key takeaways. Number 1, don't have to beat this one up, but I think we got the gist. We have to make it fun. We've got to make sure that the kids enjoy the experience. And I think the biggest measure of a great coach is when your athletes all come back the following season. That to me is the biggest barometer, and not the wins and losses and what have you, but if they come back the following year and they have a big smile on their face, then you know you did your job the prior year. This last video I'm going to skip because it's getting close to that cutoff in terms of time, but I will share. And Steve Hansen was the former All Blacks coach, and he's now moved on after the World Cup this year. But in this video, it's the adult version of what was shared for the kids earlier on. And the All Blacks themselves share how important it was for them to play the game, and they had fun doing so. So one of the best organizations with an all-time winning percentage, over 70% in 100 years. In the last 15, 20, they've been over 80%. If they said they're playing the game because it's fun, then maybe we should keep that in perspective.
Okay.
Number 2, also from True Sport, although dated, but it was reinforced with a series of summits that was done last year as a result of articles that was done in the CBC. Over 200, I think it was 222 coaches in Canada have been criminally prosecuted of sexual abuse. So it kind of reinforces, 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, number 1 issue facing community sports was harassment. Number 2 is intolerance to racism and the lack of fair play. So we still have some work to do to make sure that the codes of conduct and we make sure that the safe in general is safe for all participants. And I think, as we come out of COVID, we've had a reflectionary period that hopefully we'll see that better normal is what I'm aspiring for. Number 3, teach skills. And I'm a big believer that sports can teach skills, but it's the coaches that really reinforce that and teach life skills, not just the skills of the game. Big 4 for me are winning with humility, losing with dignity, respect, and sportsmanship. I think as you've seen with the video that was done by Ray Winstone, that respect and that we had of the sports growing up, it maybe is not being reinforced to the same extent that it could be or should be. And then all the other life skills that you can learn through sport, I think it's really important that coaches recognize that and use that as their core values of building their teams. Care passionately. Ironically, when we did the word cloud, it was mainly on fun, but I've also done word clouds on. I've asked coaches what are the top 3 characteristics of the greatest coach you ever had, and time permitting, I would have done that just as kind of curiosity. But number 1 answer that I've gotten, and I've done this by word cloud, I've done it by sticky notes, I've done it a whole bunch of different ways, is caring. The whole connection piece. The greatest coaches of all time truly care about their athletes, and they help them not only become great athletes, but also great people. And right up there is respect and passion for the game and a whole bunch of other, emotional intelligence. It's not necessarily skills, drills, tactics, systems. And number 5, it's where this whole thing kind of wraps around full circle, is don't be a kid's last coach. I had a great analogy, and to close off, I'm going to share with you. I was at a conference that was hosted by my good friend John O'Sullivan, Chain of the Game, who I'm also a speaker for. And Dr. Jerry Lynch was at the conference, and they do a lot of work together. He sat on his infamous perch, kind of hard to, without actually seeing a stool, but we all joked about it. And most of us that were at that conference are or, middle-aged coaches. A lot of us had injuries to our sports, and he asked us all to sit on a gymnasium floor. And we're kind of like, where's he going with this? So while we went down, and many of us were struggling getting down and also getting up afterwards, circled around him, and he then shared with us, he says, you know what? I learned a long time ago that my purpose as a coach was not to make a living. And we all just kind of shook our heads going, he's one of the top sports psychologists in the world. He's written over 12 books. He's been involved with teams, over 30 teams going to NCAA championships, and you're not making a living? He goes, no, I realized early on that my calling, my purpose was to make a difference, developing youth into adults. And it was about 5 years ago, and it completely changed my perspective of what our true purpose is of coaches, and I've kind of revolved and kind of focused in really on the life skills and having a lot of dialogue in terms of how we can get to transformational coaching and what have you. But please ensure that the legacy that you leave behind is a positive one, and you're not a kid's last coach, because if we want to buck the trends of the 5-year shorter life expectancy, we really got to do what we can to keep kids in the game and keep them in the game for life. So that is my exec summary, and I'm trying to get down to the Q&A. So we've got some time right now, so we'll open her up.
Thanks, Glenn, for a fabulous presentation. As Glenn said, we'll open the floor to any questions, whether you'd like to unmute your microphone and ask, or type in the chat. Any questions from anybody on the presentation today?
While we're waiting for questions, I just want to tie into Simon actually had a comment, and I just want to add on to that. Yeah, that the Ivy League sports that can be referenced in the article, they're not actually offering athletic scholarships. They're focusing on academic, but you can qualify for financial assistance, and squash is a good medium to get there, conduit. Another athlete that has taken the world by storm, I'm not sure if you're familiar or anybody that follows the NFL, I think Chase Claypool, who is now on Pittsburgh Steelers, grew up at Abbotsford, went to Notre Dame on a combination scholarship, and he has taken the NFL by storm, and he's already in commercials. I think already at one game he got 4 touchdowns, set a record for a Canadian rookie particularly, and I think he's at 6 touchdowns, and he's gone kind of down that path. But they said there's only been like 2 other really high level Canadians have gone down to NCAA, majority of which will play in the CFL. But anybody wants to tag on to that, we can talk about that as well. So have Claypool on your fantasy team. Yeah, you're going to probably do well. Any questions? Okay, question. I've seen a coach only coach his favorites and bully and abuse other players. Turns out that this has been going on for 20 years. Huh. Yeah, as the coach that my son had, which kind of led to him quitting. Is this a team sport, or is this individual? Individual. And he's been abusive for 20 years. Well, 2 things. I suspect, I don't know if parents are turning a blind eye towards that type of behavior, but I do encourage it, and it has to be done right. Many parents will go and they'll confront the coach directly. And if you're embarrassing in front of players, and whether it's team or individual, that's just going to make it worse. But if it's an ongoing thing, and if it's been going on that lengthy period of time, bullying is not being condoned in any shape, aspect, or form, and that's something that needs to be brought to the executive level so that it can be addressed. And an example I'll give you in the coaching world, if any of you follow the NHL, John Tortorella was probably one of those coaches, right? And I think everybody agree watching what he did with the Canucks, and that 1 year where he literally destroyed the team. They didn't make the playoffs. The Sedins got all their injuries. Edler was a -37. He was then, fired by the Canucks, and he was out of coaching for a while, and he was brought back for the World Championships. But John Jameson, who had been familiar with him in USA Hockey, went to him and said, "Look, John, you're a smart coach, but you need to change your style. gone are the days where you can do what you're doing, you know, berating players, screaming at blah, blah, blah. And he did. And look what happened. The following, when the year he took over Columbus, he ended up getting, you know, he was coach of the year. He's been hence nominated for coach of the year again, but he had to completely shift his behavior and his focus. So until it's brought to the higher levels, it'll just continue to happen over and over again. So that'd be kind of my answer on that one, is figure out how to escalate it, but doing it diplomatically. What is a good way for me to put all the chances on his sides? Not sure where to go. I've seen more parents and coaches bullying kids. I've got to click off now. I really enjoy the presentation. Yeah, you know, that's why I emphasize the parental behavior towards kids. And that ride home it can be a deal breaker. And I'm glad that it's finally coming to light, because when I asked kids what was not fun about sports, you know, playing their favorites was one, the ride home was another one. And it was not high percentage, probably about 30% of the kids, but you know, that's a big percentage when you think about it. But when I've seen it actually happening as they're leaving, you know, rinks or fields or basketball courts, it blows my mind how serious parents are taking it. And when I was growing up, I was really, I guess, fortunate and unfortunate, because I lost my father at a really young age. But my mother was just a diehard big supporter in any sports we played. She was always applauding us, always positive. And I just don't understand how it's evolved, but I think a big driver is the money. You know, people chasing NCAA, people chasing professional contracts. That's been a big driver. Any other questions, comments? How do you see COVID impacting youth sports? Will we lose 25% capacity, or what is your prediction? 5-year concept really resonated with me. I have a newborn and a 2-year-old. Yeah, that video, when I first saw it, I'll tell you, like, that was about 5 years ago. My kids are no longer kids; they're young adults now. They're both in the college system. I've almost fell out of my chair. I literally was like, that can't. And that's kind of what made me go down this path, really. As far as COVID, it's really how we come out of it. I keep aspiring, and I'm still interacting with a lot of my colleagues who went down this path 5+ years ago to, you know, educate parents and work with coaches so that we can kind of reverse it back for kids. That's what I mean by what I hope the better normal. The biggest challenge is, are sports going to sustain, and are they going to be able to come out of the financial challenges that we're all facing? Number one. And two, are they going to use this reflectionary period over the last 6 months and then some to invest in what I think is incredibly important, parent education, which is not really being done in a main way in Canada, starting to gain a lot of momentum in the US. And we're also speakers for working with parents in sport, and they've gained a lot of traction in the UK, but we really got to go down. And the other one is the coach education component. We focus a lot with CAC on skills, drills, tactics, and systems, which is important. But I really believe we need to add more of the art to coaching, and that's really what we focus on at Paradigm Sports, is how to coach, you know, how to engage your players, how to connect with your parents, how to you know, develop cultures of excellence. That's kind of our foray, and that's really where I think we need to invest. So if we do those, then I think we're going to come out of COVID in a better way, and we will see the retention numbers increase and grow. I work with a few organizations that really have that on their platform, and they have a 5-year strategic plan because they want to grow their numbers, and I think that's where we need to go. Any other questions? I know a lot of you are probably if you're working at home, like many of us are now, you might have some challenges and stuff like that. So this slide is the one that I left off last, and you will get a copy of this deck. If anything comes up after the fact, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. And you know, we've got 2 different social media platforms, because at Paradigm Sports, but we also have For Love of the Game, which is our kind of our digital platform, and we share a lot of resources on both those. So by all means, feel free to go to our sites and, you know, check out all the different stuff that we share out and try to help coaches to the best of our ability, as well as parents.
Great, thanks, Glenn. I think for the sake of time, we'll wrap things up. I first off want to thank you for your wonderful presentation today on Don't Be a Kid's Last Coach. For the coaches still on the call, I do have Glenn coming back doing another presentation in February 2021 titled Coaching Beyond the Game. So keep an eye out for that registration when it opens, probably in a few weeks from now. Coming up next for our webinars between now and December, we have one of our former national team athletes, Sam Cornett, speaking to becoming a national team athlete. And that's going to be tailored to both coaching as well as athletes. So if you've got players that you think might benefit from it, please don't hesitate to register. Then Pat Hartunian will talk about mental strength, your guide to success in sports and life. Those are in November. And then we have Esme Gillick speaking to emotional intelligence and its implications to sport coaching in December. So those are our upcoming webinars between now and the end of December. And then we'll have a bunch more in the new year. So again, thank you for attending today's Squash Canada Coach PD webinar. Thank you, Glenn, for the presentation. And thank you again, everyone, for attending.
Thanks, Jeff. It was great.